let's talk about the Shanahan coaching tree. This was forwarded to me. I thought it was interesting. Mike McDaniel was doing an interview yesterday. And he was asked about, coming from the Shanahan coaching tree, and what about that tree and that system enables players to get so open. You know how McDaniel does. He goes on like a whole long lecture, like he's doing a seminar at Yale, which I really
likes
appreciate.
To have a little symposium.
Yeah, like his weekly interviews are like 25 minutes. Not
they're
like
long form.
And they're really cool. And so he goes all into it, but he's very careful with his words, and he mentions, the Mike Shanahan, coaching for Mike Shanahan and being mentored by him, and he never ever references Kyle Shanahan, which I think was intentional. And maybe some people think it's no big deal, but I also think it gives a cool little backdrop for what this game is this week. Kyle against McVay. Eventually it'll be Kyle against Mike McDaniel. These guys look at each other as peers, not necessarily as like Kyle as someone who's above them. I think they're all competing to be who is Mike Shanahan's heir.
Right.
Is it going to be his son? Or is it going to be one of his adopted sons? I kind of get the feeling that McDaniel almost looks at himself as like an adopted football son of Mike Shanahan.
I know he really
and maybe
does
more worthy
Mike.
of the title than his own son. Sorry.
Jesus Christ, Grant. I know I know he really respects Mike. He thinks the world of Coach Shanahan. He looks at Coach. I mean, everybody looks at like their mentors that way. I look at the guys who gave me a chance. Right. And they saw something in me and showed me the ropes, and kind of, the same thing is in journalism. Like you and your dad have a special relationship. It's not just because you his son, but it's that you guys share a professional likeness. You know what I'm saying? Where he has mentored you outside of just raising you. He knows what you're made of. Right? Some of the SOPs and how you even go about your job is because of what your father has instilled in you, and not by just telling you. What you actually got to see the man do, right? Mm-hmm. And that's how coaches feel about their mentors. That's how mentees feel about their mentors. In a way, you would almost say that when people do try to reference or talk to Mike McDaniel, that is, and try to reference him being under Kyle Shanahan's coaching tree, I think that him correcting the record isn't really a slight or have anything to do with Kyle at all, but I think it has a lot to do with his respect for Mike. Right? Mm-hmm. For him to let people know, like, Kyle was my colleague, right? Like, Kyle and I worked together. Right?
Yes.
Like, Kyle brought me along in opportunities he had, just like 80% of everywhere that somebody works, you got there by reference because you know somebody that worked there, they have an in with the company, and they got you hired.
But also, from McDaniel's perspective, Kyle wasn't doing him a favor.
No.
I think from McDaniel's perspective, maybe Kyle was, I don't want to say it.
Sharks are born swimming, Grant.
Taking credit. For some of his work.
They don't have room for anybody to be on a coaching staff just because he's just there or because he just knows a guy. It doesn't work that way. Right? Especially when you don't have cachet or you don't have a famous last name. Those are for the people with the last names in football who get to just show up and be around because they've always been around. But if you're not blooded in, meaning that if you don't have a family member or some type of person that has legit cachet or legacy with the NFL, it is 1,000% a meritocracy. All right? It is 1,000% about how... Go ahead.
Remember that podcast from this offseason, the play callers were about the four guys, McVay, Shanahan, McDaniel, and LaFleur. I think the way it was packaged is like, they're all part of the same group and they're all pulling for each other and they're all a family. Like, I get the feeling it's much more competitive. Like, they're all come from the Mike Shanahan coaching tree and they're all trying to make the point that they're the one. They are the best. And it's like each one has their little claim to fame. McVay has a Super Bowl ring no one else does. LaFleur is in the process of developing Jordan Love, which could be the feather in his cap. And then Mike McDaniel and Kyle Shanahan seem to be like battling it out for premier play designer. And I think McDaniel thinks he's better. And I think that's a very interesting perspective. I'm sure Kyle thinks he's better too. I don't get the feeling McVay thinks he's a better play designer than either of them. I think McVay knows what he does.
Yeah, and I think that's the beauty of McVay, and I think that's why out of all of them, he's the only one that's won. I feel
He takes
like
his ego out of it a little bit more, out of
Sean
the play
not only
design.
takes his
Yeah.
ego out of it, but I feel like, and I feel honestly, I feel like Mike McDaniel is taking more of a page out of Sean's book than he ever would have out of Kyle's, especially with his bedside manner and how he deals with his teammates, how open he is, how much he's a servant coach. He leads first with how
Also,
can I
remember
help
the
you?
first thing McVay did was hire Wade Phillips, the old head, to run the defense, just like Mike McDaniel brings in Vic Fangio. Like, no ego, man. Like, I know you've been a head coach for a long time. I want a fellow head coach on my team.
And Coach Phillips, even like I remember years ago, Coach Phillips on record said that this probably one of the best jobs that he's ever had in his career because of how respected and well liked he was on that Rams staff. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell you, man, they may be cordial, but nobody's hooking up on the weekends or Thanksgiving or Christmas to go kick it. Kyle's got too much time in Cabo. He's ain't no time to be messing around with his real colleagues. He's got too much time kicking it with his teammates. So
yeah,
it's not necessarily anything that's surprising to me, but yeah, like I know that bothers people. That would bother me if I worked with you and somebody was like, yeah, I am a part of the Grant Cohn content creators tree. I am. But if somebody came to me and said that I was of something that this guy was like my equal, I'd be like, no. Like, I worked with that guy. He didn't put me on.
You know what it reminds me of? Do you remember when Kyrie Irving was on the Cavs and someone asked what it was like to have LeBron James as like almost like a father figure to him? And he was like, man, that's my teammate. I have a dad. Yeah. I have a dad. His name is something, something, something. Like, that's my team. And I think that's what, now Kyrie isn't exactly a winner, but I think that's why he wanted nothing to do with LeBron after a while. It's like, man.
Yeah, because being with you means that I got to be under you. I can't just be with you. That means that I have to be in a subservient role to you because you take too much air out of the room. You know what I'm saying? And it's not even the fact that the people around you do it. That's cool. You can't control them, but you lean in. You like that shit.
Yeah, and I feel like McDaniel has that chip on his shoulder that Kyrie has, and I feel like McDaniel looks at Kyle the way that Kyrie looks at LeBron. Like, man, you took all the credit, you minimized me, and now I'm going to go elsewhere and show everyone that I was the real genius. And I just want to say, his offense scored more points this week than Kyle's. And I think most people, at least most Niner fans, would say that Purdy's better than Tua. So just keep in mind, watch what they're doing in Miami. That's a pretty good offense down there.
Look, I'm going to tell you this right now. We essentially ended their season, right?
Yes.
The Wolves were falling off, and we are the ones who drove in the nail in the coffin.
Correct.
Yeah. I will say this. They look a lot better. Tua looks in shape. He did a lot of stuff over the offseason. Hopefully, we'll know what's going on with him later. But everything means something, and something isn't everything. So it's kind of like, you can't say that it doesn't mean anything. It does mean something. But does it mean everything? Of course not. So we'll see. But like we talked about over the offseason, now we get to see what other teams were doing over the offseason. We weren't the only teams with an offseason trying to get their team better or reporting on the team. So, we're going to see that week to week, man. Like, Dallas.
I do want to point out that these four guys, McVay, Shanahan, LaFleur, McDaniel, all of them did a great job week one.
Yep.
All of them.
Yep.
All of them won. All of them put up at least 30 points.
And the Rams are doing it without Cooper Kupp.
Yes, they are.